that's actually originally why I asked you to come talk to our bike team, because I knew that you were following all of the legislative session on bike and pedestrian things, right? And so I was excited to have any updates that you could give us on those and what we can sort of pepper our legislators with, like support or, ooh, this is real bad.
Right.
So yeah, if you can, I mean, we got somebody joining. It looks like John's joining. So
okay, give me just a second here. I want to pull up a document that I have just so I make sure I don't forget anything. So give me a moment. Okay. Here.
It's funny though, yeah, when I say that we should pepper our city, like our elected officials, for most of us, it's the same person. Like it really is like 3 people at most, depending on if you're technically downtown or technically midtown. But yeah, we don't really cross the full, even Omaha spectrum of people.
Okay. I've got it here.
All right.
Video so you can see. Okay, well,
hey, Julie
Harris with Bike Walk Nebraska. So I guess maybe I'll just quick update on these and where we've done and our position and where they stand. And I'm happy to answer all of your questions. So the first one, LB 771, sponsored by Jen Day of Gretna, Senator Day of Gretna. Super wonky, just basically takes the statutory definition of an e-bike and updates it. So right now it's just a standard, an e-bike is blah, blah, blah. And it would instead put in the 3-tier classification system that really is the industry standard. You know, the class 1 e-bike is like what you would get on your BCycle. If you checked out an e-bike, they're the ones at most of the shops. I have one. Many of you probably have one. But we testified in favor of this because it reflects the updated times. We have updated statutes because of electric cars and self-driving this and that. So we need to do the same for e-bikes. And it also helps then also to prevent the baby getting thrown out with the bathwater. So, if Game and Parks wants to say no e-bikes allowed in the park, well, class 1 e-bikes versus a class 3 e-bike, at least that gives us some room to have a conversation. And that's our goal. So, I haven't heard any updates on that, but do
you have any thoughts on like when that started to be a thing in Omaha and they were saying like we're going to allow class 1 but not class 2 or 3, and we pointed out that they are visually non-distinct. Like I'm curious how that plays. That's a problem for later on, but it's just one of those things. Like I agree with you that now you can't just say all or none. You can say class 1 but not class 2.
Yeah.
But I think that's such a weird like enforcement issue of.
Well, right. And that's what and it's so funny because it's my experience that if you get in front of the transportation committee in Lincoln and you say the word bicycle, every issue comes out. And I had to keep telling them, this bill does not impact enforcement of any kind or access of any kind. It literally changes the definition, and that is all. It just changes the words. But helmets and yada yada yada. It's like, no, focus, people. So yeah, the word bike seems to bring that out in people. But so basically what we said is, we can work with Game and Parks and whomever else on issues related to access, enforcement, whatever it is, but at least this way we get to have the conversation.
Okay.
LB 731 was brought by Senator John Kavanaugh of Midtown. This was the pole in the sidewalk issue from the Verizon pole going in at 55th and Poppleton. Basically, Senator Kavanaugh is saying that if a utility company needs to give notice to property owners before they start doing work in their yard, and B, they need to have a written plan ahead of time for how their poles will meet ADA standards, as opposed to putting a pole in a sidewalk and then, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Well, I guess we'll go around the sidewalk. Well, now we'll do. So this was really funny because I don't know if you all followed this issue once it became clear last summer, but the city was saying their hands were tied. The states were saying, no, they're not. And there's all this case law from other states saying, no, the city's hands are tied. You did this. And it went back and forth and back and forth. Unfortunately for Senator Kavanaugh, the broadband bill that this started all of this was Senator Friesen's baby. Senator Friesen is the chair of the Transportation Committee. So Senator Friesen didn't take kindly to somebody telling him that something was wrong with his bill, that his baby that he got passed. And the senators were nearly apoplectic. Why? This is not a state issue. The city of Omaha needs to get their shit together. Why are you talking to us about this? It was maddening because honestly, the city is saying that they've done everything they could, and I believe that that's true. The state is trying to not claim that their bill was flawed. I don't know what's going to happen, but I suspect that one won't go any farther just because Senator Friesen is so mad. I saw him in the hallway like 3 days later, and he's still shaking his head about the poll. Is there no such thing as common sense in the city of Omaha? Why would they allow this? I'm just like, oh God. So we'll see about that. But obviously we testified in favor of not having polls and sidewalks.
How do like big utility plant, like the transmission towers and things like that, like what process do they use and how is that different? I mean, this is obviously much different because it's localized and not, it doesn't require an eminent domain.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that the driving issue behind all of this pole placement stuff is the speed of the internet. So, and as Senator Kavanaugh was explaining it, the law requires that the 5G have that, your phone be at 10 gigabytes, whatever it is per minute. I'm making this up. And if you put the pole 2 feet this direction, you might get 9.9 gigabytes, and that's not, no. And at 55th and Poppleton, they couldn't put the pole over here because there's water lines. They couldn't put it over here because there's something buried. They couldn't put it here, there, another. So it had to go in the middle of the sidewalk. Absolute shenanigans. We all know it. I don't know what's going to come of it, but Senator Friesen was not pleased.
Just to comment on it, do you think this should be something that we talk about at the city level? I mean, because this doesn't just apply to telecommunications, it's also streetlights and other poles, just utility poles that generally find their way into sidewalks. And I was thinking this, I was biking on Dodge in front of Crossroads just the other day, and there's one where there's a pole right in the middle of the sidewalk, and there is a little like extension, like they added a little thing. And then there's one like 20 feet later where they just didn't do that. Like it's the same pole sidewalk, but they don't have the bump out. And granted, this is in front of a now dead mall, vacant lot situation, but I'm just curious, like this feels like this is probably an Omaha thing more than a state of Nebraska thing. And
yeah, it's I don't know. It's so messed up now. The way the bill was written, Senator Kavanaugh told me that literally if you took it to the very letter of the law, a utility company would be able to put a pole in the middle of the street. I mean, it's just a mess. And other states are finding they're having these same exact problems, and the cities are taking it to court, and I've read the cases and they're not getting anywhere. So, the thing though with Derek, what you're saying, the thing that we've heard a lot over the years is, we'd love to put in a side path or a bike lane or whatever. And the city comes back and says, well, the cost of moving all these utilities is just going to be too much. So we can't build the XYZ bike lane because it's going to be too expensive because we have to move all these utilities. So now we're putting in more poles that are going to have to be moved if something needs to change. Apparently NDOT exempted all of their poles from 5G stuff getting put on them. There's other poles you can't put it on, that pole or this pole. I mean, it's just so dumb. I don't know what else to say. it's just dumb. And then the other thing about that bill that we brought up was that, for us, there's a whole lot of places across the entire state of Nebraska that don't have a state senator down 2 blocks away, or an advocacy group that's really paying attention to this stuff. Nor do they have city staff who can truly assess whether the sidewalk the utility company puts around is even worth a darn. So in Omaha, if they put in a crappy sidewalk to get around their pole, and that sidewalk starts to break down, who's responsible to maintain it? The homeowner. And so now the homeowner has a crappy sidewalk that they didn't want. Nobody told them it was going in, and they're having to maintain it. So I don't know. It is a giant mess. I don't know what's going to happen with that one, but.
Okay, but that is something that we should continue on our side to still pressure city council, mayor, anybody that will listen to us on designating sidewalks as some sort of part of the transportation network that shouldn't have poles in the middle of them.
Well, I don't know. Honestly, Derek, I don't know that even if we had that, because, technically the complete streets policy, you would think, would be able to prevent this from happening in the first place. But the way the bill was written, the utility companies don't really even have to work with the city. They can just go in and start putting in poles. So I don't know that it's a city problem, but we have to just monitor in general.
So this came up the other night, and maybe better, that the complete streets policy exists on paper, but none of it has been promulgated in a way that it's actually binding on public works. And I was trying to look.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I was trying to look around on the city's webpage, and I found that maybe like something with ramps and ADA had been turned into binding, it sounded like. So is that kind of where it stands?
So the complete streets policy is not an ordinance. So it was adopted as part of the transportation master plan. So there's nothing ordinance related. That's where the teeth would be. A lot of other cities have done ordinance based policies, and those have the most teeth. So that's where that stands. The ADA is one of those things that's a federal guideline that they have to follow. So that's definitely part of it. But the city has since come up with, oh gosh, what are they called? Street design guidelines or something like that, in theory that they're supposed to use those when they design new streets or go to rehab streets that are under construction. But, those can't, because it's not an ordinance. Yes, somebody could derail that and keep it from happening.
Neat.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. What else? Yeah. What else is happening?
What else we got? Okay. I'm going to come back to the two biggies. So
okay.
Senator Moorfeld, LB 991. This is one we're just sort of monitoring. This is the high-speed rail between Omaha and Lincoln. For us, then it becomes a first mile, last mile kind of a deal once you get off that high-speed train and you're trying to get somewhere. But also, I think the bill was written so that it doesn't necessarily reference just a train, but rather, I think, active transportation in general between Omaha and Lincoln. So we're just kind of monitoring that and seeing that. That's just a study. It would call for NDOT or somebody to do a study about it. So it doesn't really have a lot of huge impact there.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to have 2 BCycle memberships, I just recently learned.
Yes. One for Omaha and one for Lincoln.
Benny. All right.
BCycle used to be completely reciprocity. You can.
That's not my choice. That was
and there's Benny. Hi, Benny.
Hi.
It used to be you could be. There's all kinds
I know. I just gave Benny a hard time about that the other day because I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be in Lincoln, and I'll just use my BCycle membership there." And he's like, "You got to get a new one."
Okay, let's see. Senator Wayne, Justin Wayne. I was just there today. LB 999. You may have been following. There was a MAPA. It wasn't a block talk. It was just like a public input meeting a couple of weeks ago about North 30th Street, and Highway 75 goes north of Dodge, and eventually, once it gets to, I don't know, Sorensen Parkway, it ceases to become a 4-lane road, and it narrows down and it goes through Florence on North 30th Street
Yeah.
on more of a real city street design. I guess my brain is a little fried.
But yes, that is
So
the way that works. Is that if you're on 75 North, it just funnels you into North 30th Street, and then
right.
you're through Florence,
And
which is very obviously a neighborhood.
yes. So, during that public input session, we heard a lot about the amount of truck traffic rumbling through neighborhoods. It's a quality of life issue. It's a business issue. It's from our perspective, it's a safety issue because, it's a state highway. It's my soapbox, state highways within municipal boundaries. We need to cater to the people who are living in that neighborhood, not the trucks that need to get through as fast as they can. Senator Wayne, as part of his project proposal, he would like to see a bridge built over the Missouri River, somehow linking off of 16th Street that would then divert the truck traffic across the river that way and onto the interstate or something. I'm not totally sure, but he wrote a bill to compel NDOT to apply for a grant, like a raise grant, to build a bridge. He kept it very vague. He did that for a reason, because it's technically against the Nebraska Constitution for state legislatures to compel NDOT to build a road, build a bridge, whatever. NDOT is supposed to be able to be doing that independently. Interestingly enough, there was a bill earlier in the day that was Senator Flood in Norfolk, essentially doing the same thing, compelling NDOT to create a superhighway between Norfolk and Columbus that's been on the books as a possibility forever, and they've never built it. So it was just like, Senator Flood, congressional candidate, wants a highway, but they came down on him pretty hard too. They were pretty equal opportunity on this. NDOT testified in opposition on both bills because the process, you can't, it's just not the way they do business. We don't want to get in the business of politically taking one project and leapfrogging it over these others that have been in the pipeline for a long time. It's a whole thing. So that was good. It was funny from my perspective to be sitting in the audience and to have a state senator with Senator Flood's esteem being told no by NDOT. I'm like, welcome to my world. Glad somebody else is being told no by NDOT besides me for once. But I did testify for Senator Wayne in a neutral capacity today. And basically what I said was that the process that he has outlined for LB 999 may not be the right thing, but his intentions are spot on. And that is, we need to make it safer for biking and walking in North Omaha. When Highway 75 was built, it was a travesty, and this transportation policy has a major impact on racial inequities. And we've seen that here, and if we have a chance to make it right, we should do that. And we needed that comment to be reflected in the record. So, health disparities, there's the highest asthma rates in Omaha are in that area. And I can't imagine that trucks rumbling through with all that exhaust and fumes is helping. So it's health inequities, it's racial inequities, transportation policy matters. So that's kind of what was our little soapbox moment today. But
so there have been I've seen some examples where people are trying to use the streetlight data we have access to calculate pollution impacts at the neighborhood level. And that's one of the things we're going to try and sell as student projects this spring. So if you're interested in maybe trying to quantify some of that.
Yeah. Well, a few years ago, the health department, Andy Wessel, before COVID and everything got turned upside down, they used to do health impact assessments on transportation projects. And they don't do them anymore. And that's a real shame, because this project is a perfect opportunity to do that and to show that, the health outcomes in this area are likely directly impacted by the amount of traffic. I have forever used the example of the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta to show this. Way back in the day when they had the Olympics there, they banned single occupancy cars from coming into downtown Atlanta during the Olympics because of the traffic it was creating. And as a result, pediatric asthma intakes at emergency rooms just dropped. Everything health, emergency rooms were just bored out of their tears because there was no smog in the atmosphere that was causing all these health problems. So, we know it's a thing. And then last but not least here, we have the Star Wars Committee. Are you guys all familiar with the Star Wars Committee? To spend the ARPA funds, the COVID relief funds that the federal government is sending to Nebraska. It's like $1 billion. They've done all this study. They want to do all these things. They want to build a lake between Omaha and Lincoln. I've started calling it Lake ARPA. They want to do all this with this money, and we're trying to tell them that building out the Cowboy Trail and the gap in the Mopac Trail would be a much better use of this funding. People want trails. It's been shown in a variety of surveys that Game and Parks has done. People want trails. We're a much cheaper, much more accessible, desirable thing to do than to build a lake that will require years and years of environmental review, or a canal to draw water from the Platte River, which is going to cost $500 million and likely will be tied up in litigation for years. Well, we can build a trail tomorrow. So why don't you just give us the money? So we're trying to make the case. And that's what LB 813 is. And the hearing is tomorrow. It's in front of the Appropriations Committee. And we're asking for money to build out the remaining miles of the 92 miles of the Cowboy Trail, and then the 8 miles of the gap between Omaha and Lincoln on the Mopac Trail. So 100 miles of trail for about the cost of 2.5 miles of 4-lane road. Seems like a legitimate trade-off. I wasn't sure what to think about our chances, but I'm telling you that this Lake ARPA thing has people rolling their eyes. Even though the governor introduced it and the governor is supporting it, I'm really surprised that people are not on board with this at all. So I'm thinking our chances, knock on wood, might be pretty good for this. How can we support the trail? So after tomorrow, we're going to need to start sending letters of support to the Appropriations Committee so that they will vote this out of committee and onto the floor. And that's the same with LB 981, which is the last one I'll talk about here, and it's tied into this one. LB 981 would create a maintenance endowment fund of sorts for the Cowboy Trail.
You said 991?
981.
981, thank you.
So right now the Cowboy Trail goes from Norfolk to Valentine, and then there's a little piece between Gordon and Rushville that's done, and then there's another piece closer to Shadron that's done. But otherwise, there's this big gap in the trail. And Game and Parks would love to add more miles, but they're telling us they can't afford to maintain the Cowboy Trail as it is, let alone if there's more miles. So we're proposing a $15 million one-time transfer of funds to Game and Parks that would be invested and then spent down at $750,000 each year for maintenance. That would keep the fund solvent until about 2048, give or take, they're estimating. And so 25 plus years of maintenance funding would be in their bank account that they could then use to maintain the current trail and hopefully extensions as we get them built. This would also, if we don't get money to build more trail, what we can also hang our hats on here is that what they're going to tell us, if they don't want to build trail, they're going to say, we want private money to build the trail. Okay, fine. But you know what? Private money is not going to come in and invest if they don't see that this state has skin in the game. If the state doesn't have a solid maintenance plan, the Peter Kiewit Foundation is not going to want to give money to build more trail because they're going to think it's a wasted investment. So I think we've got a solid, no matter what they try to throw at us, we have a solid way to respond. So LB 981 is in Game and Parks, or not Game and Parks, Natural Resources Committee right now. So letters to the Natural Resources Committee members to vote in favor of 981 to vote it out of committee and onto the floor is what we need for that one. And I can send you all a list of the committee members for that. But and Senator John Kavanaugh is on that list, and so is Justin Wayne. Now he's, you know, and rightfully so, he is doing everything he can to fight for North Omaha for ARPA funds and other funding right now. And a trail in the Sandhills may not be really on his radar screen, but I'm hoping that we can get some letters into him and that he will be a vote to at least get it out of committee so we can keep it alive on the floor.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank
That's
you
a
for
lot.
all of that work. That is a lot. Okay, well, thank you there. I'm going to give Benny a moment just to give us the BCycle updates, and then we want to grill both of you about how a streetcar affects our only bikeway.
Bring it on.
Okay,
Go, Benny.
Benny, what's happening?
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
No, you're great.
As most of you know, I think Heartland BCycle also runs the Lincoln Bike Share program called Bike Link. And we had to move into a new shop / office today. So I was not looking forward to a move in January.
That's right.
Today was an amazing January day, and we moved the entire shop and got it all done.
Good.
It was so nice out. Saw people riding bikes in shorts and t-shirts. It was great. But for Omaha, Heartland BCycle, which we are rebranding to just Heartland Bike Share. So you'll hear me use those interchangeably. We have a new logo and such. It'll be rolling out over the next year or two. Our 2022 expansion, the main one will be, how much time do I have actually?
Oh, I mean, we scheduled this till 7. You have as much time as you want. I don't want to eat up all of Julie's time. So
Sure.
you want to under 10 minutes, and then you can they'll bring the both of you in to talk about cars, because that feels like something where we need to shout and maybe not shout. I don't know.
Let me present my expansion slides.
Okay. Do you have access to do that?
Let me see. No, you disabled.
I didn't disable. Okay. So what do I have to do? Then I have to make you the host, which is the only thing I know how to do.
Oh, I can just talk through it if we all know.
No, I'm just going to make you're now a co-host.
Co-hosting.
Deal with that. Now, can you share?
Yeah. Y'all seeing that?
Yes.
Are you seeing are you seeing my?
Yes. It says Heartland B. Yeah, I think we got, well, no, I'm seeing your secondary screen.
Here, let me swap them.
I can see the next screen. Yep. There it is. Yep. 100%.
I'm going to fly through some of these because y'all know most of it. I give this to folks who aren't quite sure about who we are. We are a nonprofit. I will reiterate that. But since we're talking about expansion in 2022, this is what New York City Bike Share looks like. Very dense, very successful. Some people don't think we should have so many bike share stations. Obviously, I disagree. And most successful bike share programs right now, almost all of them actually are expanding and densifying. So stations that are closer together, we're finding get used more. This is our current footprint, basically. And this heat map is exciting to look at. It was from 2020. I don't have the stations on this heat map, but you can see how far people are riding, primarily the e-bikes outside of the city, which is what I use to leverage the new station in Bellevue. If any of you have seen that one, that's our most recent or second most recent station. We have the app. These are our new 3.0 stations that we're installing moving forward. There's no more 1.0 stations that have the credit card kiosk. They all look like these black individual docks. And then of course our e-bikes. I got 100 more in the shop right now that'll be deployed this spring, and more coming after that, hopefully. But to get to the expansion, so here's the big one. Hopefully, if I get as soon as I have the equipment, we'll install these. We have the funds, but like everything else, it's hard to get since COVID. There will be 12 more stations. 2 of these are already installed, 10th and Douglas and 19th and Douglas. But we'll be putting stations at all these where the B's are, including those west ones at 78th and Dodge, right where the Keystone Trail is by the gas station, and then 72nd and Dodge. which would be huge. Potentially the new library is going to be there now as well, and that Crossroads development is happening. So we're really excited to see how those stations look. North Omaha, so the North Omaha Trail will be going in this year. This map's a little better to see it now. The blue pen drops are our existing, and then the red ones are the potential or proposed stations. Some of these have funding, some of these don't. So we'll see. I always add this slide how we're not allowed to walk into our own airport, which is kind of silly. I want to put a bike share station either at the airport or at the trail around the lake there. But I won't be able to do it until we can walk into the airport at least. So no funding for this one at all yet. First Ave Trail, I have 100% funding on this. There we go. So it's only for this station on 20 or just off 25th by Hy-Vee. That will be installed this spring/summer when we get the equipment again. So that's pretty exciting. That'll close a huge gap in Council Bluffs, and that'll be our 8th station in Council Bluffs. Y'all know about the Market to Midtown Bikeway, which is right where that purple line is. And then we had 2 stations on there. We moved 1 station, and then I added 2 brand new stations. So we have 5 bike share stations right on the Market to Midtown Bikeway, which is pretty exciting. South Omaha, still kind of waiting to see what we'll do with this. We working with this group, Canopy, to see how the South Side Terrace gets developed. But we'll have definitely 2 more stations in that area. And then South 24th Street is a goal, but I have 0 funding for that right now. And then this is our Sarpy County area. The Bellevue station's already installed. Papillion is signed on for 2 more stations, which will be at Walnut Creek and Prairie Queen. We will do a station at Zorinsky, which we already have everything approved for, and we have the equipment, but we're waiting for that construction to finish off 144th Street. And then the riverfront. So you got 3 parks that are being redone right now. We have locations for all 3. The only one on here that isn't done is the 13th and Farnham one on the left side of the screen. Heartland of America Park, which doesn't open until 2023, will have probably only 2 of these will get installed. We're not sure about the one that exists that's on the river overlook. And then the Lewis and Clark Landing. We have 1 station here by the MLK JR Bridge, and then the bottom station will actually be moved up a little bit and be by the Luminarium, that museum that they're building right now. So that's pretty exciting. And that's all of them. I do like to end on this slide that we have bike share stations in Lincoln and Omaha, and then that one in Mahoney. So I like to say that we're the leading public transportation option between Omaha and Lincoln, although nobody has ridden a bike share bike at that distance yet. All right. Let's do some questions.
It would have to be an e-bike. If I showed up with an e-bike from Omaha and docked it in Lincoln, what would happen?
Well, it would not register.
Okay.
And you would have to let me know where it is so we could get it, because after BCycle updated their software, so we can't do that reciprocity, I can't track it anymore, which is so annoying. But as I told you, Derek, I was the only vendor in all 50 BCycle bike share operators that wanted to keep the reciprocity, because I'm the only vendor that has multiple programs, and other systems want to see that revenue when tourists come to their town. So it's understandable, I suppose, but I fought for it. I'll just say that.
We appreciate you on that. Which system does the Mahoney one land under?
Heartland BCycle. So the Omaha. Yeah. They don't want me to put e-bikes there, although that could easily,
it doesn't need it.
And if you rode one there, it would work for sure. I wouldn't even attempt to put e-bikes there until, well, I'm sure Julie, you talk about 771 or 717.
771, yeah.
771. And then I would make the case to put some e-bikes there. But until then, and interesting note, Mahoney, I don't know if you guys have seen that station. It's tucked real far away. I was very concerned when they told me that's where I had to put it or we couldn't do it. But it's probably my 6th or 7th busiest station overall, which is
Nice.
surprising.
I've ridden it.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got the Strava account to show it. Yeah. Because Michael got me on doing this wanderer thing. So now I got to be a completionist about riding every street. That's not healthy. That's not healthy.
How's that going for you?
Not great. I mean, I'm in like 0.25%. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. Thank you guys for sharing. Now, again, elephant in the room. We've already talked about how exciting it would be to have the public library at 72nd and Dodge. That's happening without any public input or transparency. But aside from that, how do we negotiate what seems to be a foregone conclusion that this streetcar is happening, that Mutual of Omaha is moving, that the library is moving? How do we best be advocates when it seems like the wheels are already in motion and the thing that we've been fighting for 10 years is right in the way? So how do we make sure that our existing bike infrastructure remains, that it gets better over time, and that a streetcar, because I'm not even going to fight the fact that a streetcar is going to happen. That's just, I mean, when you get enough money and momentum behind something, it's happening. So how do we best advocate for along the idea of a streetcar? Every brain neuron that says a streetcar adds value should be saying the exact same thing about a bikeway or about bike facilities. How do we best advocate for that? And to whom should we be speaking? Again, we're all Dundee downtown people, so we're not useful as a general swath of Omaha, but.
Well, okay. So here's my take on it as an advocate. So obviously, yes, the streetcar is designed to run on Harney and Farnham. And it is a done deal. It is going to happen. There is no advocating to get it to stop. So let's not.
Don't waste your capital on that, right? Make it be done happening well.
Yeah, we'll go from 42nd Street to 10th with potential to sort of wrap around, as I understand it, to maybe get to the stadium or the whatever the arena is called these days. So as Bike Walk Nebraska, I mean, Julie, the private citizen, is different than Bike Walk Nebraska, the organization. So Julie, the private citizen, the Masters of Public Administration nerd, wants to wring people's necks about this library situation. It's terrible. What has gone on behind the scenes? I don't even know. It's just not how you run a railroad. So, but that's different than Bike Walk Nebraska. And our mission is safe and accessible active transportation. So we've got to stay focused on that. We know, and you've probably seen this on our social media so far, our stand on this is if there are people riding a streetcar downtown, that means they're not driving a car. And if they're not driving a car, paying attention to where there's a parking space, then they're more likely to see the people biking and walking. More people on the streetcar, less cars downtown equals more safety. So that's what we are strongly, there's no equivocating on that. We're not out on a limb. That's where we stand on it. And this is the hand we've been dealt. The streetcar is happening. So how can we, to your point, advocate to make sure that it's not gonna be at the expense of other projects? We've known from the beginning that, when we put our pilot bike route down on Harney, that, there has been talk over the years about a streetcar on Harney. I'm going to be honest, I had no idea that this was coming. So don't think that I had any prior knowledge, because I literally was just as surprised as all of you were. But we, people like in planning have said, well, maybe someday there might be a, big pot of money falls out of the sky. Maybe there'll be a streetcar on Harney. There's room, in theory, for a streetcar and a bike lane, predicted bike lane on Harney. That's the bottom line. We've seen it in Seattle, we've seen it in Portland, but we've seen it in Oklahoma City, which is the place we need to focus on, because Seattle and Portland people will tune out the minute we say those cities, but they will pay attention if we say Oklahoma City. So
Yeah.
we're going to be looking strongly at those designs. We know there's room for it to coexist. And so obviously we will do everything we can to fight for keeping the bike lane permanent and keeping it on Harney.
Should we, as
go
part
ahead.
of that, try to advocate for it to stretch further west, that it would go all the way like along the streetcar route up to 42nd Street also?
Sure. Well, originally, the original vision for the pilot project was that it would be down the whole corridor to the Med Center, over Saddle Creek, and then through Dundee to get to UNO. Obviously, we couldn't do it all at one time. The Med Center has, recently in the last year created a master plan for their facilities, and it includes bike connectivity.
Mhm.
This new bridge over Saddle Creek, all the development that UNMC is doing, they want bike connectivity big time. They are on our side on this for sure. So, the bridge that they want to put, the land bridge or whatever over Saddle Creek, will definitely accommodate bikes. And if we can just get over Saddle Creek and make it through the surface of the moon, otherwise known as Howard Street, over on the other side of the steel casting site, will be golden, because then we can just do, signed bike routes, bike boulevards, whatever, through South Dundee to get from there. So I think that's the long-term goal. The facility would look a lot different in those other phases than it looks downtown, obviously, because of the context change, but we'd sure like it to continue. We're working on the 6-month evaluation right now for the bike lane and gathering all kinds of data. So keep sending in your comments. They're very helpful to us. We've had one true snow removal opportunity to really test the plan. Some of the business owners with driveways are not, there's one in particular that's been pretty vocal.
The tire shop, right? It's the tire shop.
No.
Oh,
Firestone, Steve is my guy. Steve is my friend.
Because there was and I was there on my fat bike, and so I just ramped it because that's fun, but it was dicey.
Yeah. And the thing is that the design of this pilot version is not necessarily, well, I could say it wouldn't be the design we would want for the permanent one, right? So we would want to take into effect drainage and runoff, and there's lots and lots of things that we would engineer differently if this was going in permanently. So right now, yeah, there's going to be ice, there's going to be drainage, there's going to be, we're going to have to tweak our snow removal to do the best we can. And we're going to just have to continue after every snowstorm to reevaluate how it went, where did we put the snow, what happened after it melted. All of that's going to, we're going to just all have to be patient as we work through all of this. And there's going to be, having one business owner upset is not great, obviously, but it's not 100 business owners. Now, we haven't had a blizzard either, so maybe those other 99 business owners are just waiting. But Steve at Firestone is our guy because he's watching out. He was the one that alerted me to the fact that Public Works didn't plow the right turn lane at 20th and Harney. So Annabelle was out there getting counters, getting the bike lane counters data downloaded the other day. And cars were trying to turn right onto 20th without getting into the turn lane because it hadn't been plowed. And so they weren't following the arrow you're supposed to follow what to turn. And they're turning across like 4 lanes at the same time. It's a little dicey. And Steve from Firestone was the one that said, hey, you've got to talk to the city. Somebody's going to get hurt out here. He's looking out for us.
I mean, the worst spot that I had encountered was over the bridge over the interstate.
Yeah.
And that was probably just that it blew over, because that's difficult to know how an interstate, and like it probably had been plowed. It just wasn't when I got there.
Yeah, that's going to be a spot that we're going to have to work through. We sent our contractor out to clear some of the crosswalks because there was a windrow of snow from when we plowed that was blocking some of them. All these things we're working through. And but the data is you're going to be blown away when you see all the data. It's really exciting. So we're working on that, and we're hoping to have that done by Valentine's Day so we can present it to the city council and the Metro Smart Cities board and all that.
And the last time I went by, I saw the counter didn't have the little tubes connected to it. So in the snow events, I assume that those are removed just as a matter of like practicality.
Yeah, because the plows, we don't want the plows to boomerang like Wile E. Coyote if they run over them.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Are there other data? Like, I know that Ryan has access to like the streetlight data, and I know that like Strava data is a thing. So is that also part of it? I mean, are there like supplements to what you're getting from the counters on the road?
Yeah, we do have Strava data, so that is helpful. It's better than, and there's been research from UNL that shows that data from Strava is actually representative of a bigger group than just the Strava users. So that's really encouraging.
That's great. I always felt dumb using Strava. Like, I just am riding my bike because that's how I navigate my city. And so I always felt silly, like tallying every time I did this. But then somebody pointed out, like, they use this data, and I definitely want my data to be part of the decision-making process for future decisions. And so
for sure.
Yeah, no, I forgot to Strava this morning, and I felt dumb about it when I got to work. And I was like,
well,
no!
You're just gonna have to make 2 trips tomorrow. Just go around the block or something.
It's the same route. It's here to UNO. It's fine.
Well,
And of course, we have Benny's data from the BCycles. We'll have scooter data, not during the winter, obviously, but that will add to it. So yeah, we've got, lots of good stuff happening, and we just got to find a way to pull it all together and tell a story with it that will really show the big picture, because just the number of people using it is that's not the big picture, right? It's the guy that now can ride with his kid to swimming lessons at the YMCA. It's the guy that can pick up his kid from the daycare that never used to be able to. Those are the stories are what's going to really tell us the big picture that's really going to help us make the case in the end. So we can have all the great data, but we got to supplement it with the good stuff too.
So to update you on the streetlight stuff, Derek, and I think Julie, you're in the loop already on this. They advertise as being better than Strava, but now once we finally got the counter data and comparing to Strava, they're both showing increases in trips, and the streetlight data was showing a decrease. And so we got a lot of staff time and bore down on what some of these measures they call the penetration rate. And what we've got to is essentially that all the ped and bike data after 2019 is trash from streetlight and not useful for anything. 2019 looks solid. I think we can do some cross-sectional stuff. And like we were talking about before, the car data seems fine for all trips. But when it comes to bike and ped stuff, what we'd hope to do, like looking at this change over time, none of that's going to be possible. And I was hoping to see, what other cities were doing in our meeting we had Thursday. And from that, it sounded like some of them that are using this data are not doing the validation that we did. So the Brandon's been helping out with that. One of the questions I have is sort of, can we leverage in the Vision Zero discussion into how, I think it'd be helpful to have, we had a clear timeline of when this bike ped master plan is supposed to roll out and how that's going to overlap or not with the design of this streetcar, which they're trying to move very quickly. And I'm new to all this, but just a quick Google search found there are major issues with overlapping bike and streetcar infrastructure and what our best practices and not. And even like Seattle is still getting dinged for millions of dollars in settlements for negligent streetcar bike overlap in like 2019.
Yeah, trying to cross the tracks when you're on your bike is dicey.
Right.
And you know what, that Ryan, that reminds me, I didn't finish my thought earlier about how bike and pedestrian can all and work together with streetcar and the bike ped master plan stuff that you just brought up. So that is, Bike Walk Nebraska is actually going to be a subcontractor on that project to help with stakeholder engagement. So we're, we've been told that this project was going to start, November. We've been told, but it's all dependent. It's NDOT that has to review. It's not at the city's fault, and we're actually subcontracting with MAPA to do the work because the money flows to them. But anyway, I think, and
that's for the master plan you're talking about.
That's for the bike pedestrian master plan. But I do think that there is an opportunity here to, even if the streetcar design gets pushed through super fast, we know right now where it's going to go. And that doesn't change the fact that we still need a network, a grid of more than one bike lane, protected bike lane that goes one direction. We need a grid. Yeah. And I do think that the streetcar stuff is going to spur conversation about all the one-way streets. And I mean, it could end up being a blessing in disguise for us for bike ped downtown. I could be wrong, but it just seems like the stars are aligning timing wise. And
I guess what I want to make sure that we do as these things are developing is just put in the right ears the idea that, like, part of the power of Orbit is that I can just bring my bike on, and then I can bike once I get to like West Roads, then I can bike down to Whole Foods because I brought my bike with me. And that was not previously an option, or at least not nearly as easy as it is now. And that we need to leverage that, right? Like, we just need to wholesale say this is a money-making venture, right? We want to enrich the areas adjacent to the streetcar. The streetcar is going to be the thing that spurs development. Development's going to be the thing that pays for the streetcar, and that's what this is. This is not mode shift as we think about it. It is not somebody, switching out transportation modes. It's just about building wealth along this line. And sure, that's great. Love it. Use that wealth to support active transportation, and really just how do we best advocate for that?
Well, I think the advantage that we have is that when, as I said before, when you're coming down, if you're coming downtown on the streetcar, you're not in a car. If you do come down in a car, you can park once and use the streetcar to get to multiple destinations, in addition to using a BCycle, in addition to walking. And, so the fact that we've got more people coming downtown, not in a car, then just amplifies the need for more BCycles, and it amplifies the need for more walkable areas. And if we're going to need more BCycles, we're going to need more bike lanes. So, either way we win. Either people are coming downtown on the streetcar, or people are coming down in their car and parking and keeping their car in one place rather than driving it to 4 different places. And then they will need to be able to get around safer. And that's where we come in.
This is my question of trying to read through everything that's been announced about this, that it's going to be, the operation is paid for by parking. And it was unclear to me how much of that $4 million or whatever it is, or 6.4 million, which is $1 million less than the last estimate that I could find. I don't know where that drop came from, but
inflation.
It's coming out of, it went the opposite. It's coming out of parking, right? And it's unclear what the mayor's saying. This is going to increase people driving downtown to ride the streetcar. And so this is going to gain in parking revenues from people driving down to park, or whether we're diverting money that's coming in from parking now. So the big question for me on that is, where are those parking fees going now? Because we're talking about cutting those things to divert the $6 million from parking into running the streetcar. What is that paying for at this moment? And that's what we kind of need to understand to know what the real costs of this are. The other thing that interested Benny that I found in this literature on streetcars and bikes is the sort of classic, seems to be the most cited study out of, I think, Vancouver in 2016, Teskey et al. They looked at what are the infrastructure scenarios most likely to send people to the hospital and bike wrecks on long infrastructure, and what are the rider characteristics. And the key predictors with women, and then people who are inexperienced riders. So things pointing to primary dangers are going to be towards like particularly BCycle users that are less familiar. And I think there's some literature on what kinds of signage and infrastructure are best likely to mitigate those risks to BCycle riders. But when you look at all the diagrams that have been produced of like artist renderings of the cycle track, or sorry, of the streetcar, none of them have bike infrastructure in them. And in fact, the one the chamber just released for Farnham by the Rose Theater, I sent to a civil engineering professor who's been looking at some stuff for us. And he's like, this is the worst possible design, where you've got bikes headed westbound would be in a lane with the tracks in the lane and then parking on the right, which is similar to what Teskey found, is that like the worst you can have is single lane, like shared lane with parking on the right. So there are these trade-offs. Are we going to have this parking? Particularly, I think when we get to, if we have the cycle track on Harney, that's less of an issue. But when we get to this Farnham, where it's all in one thing, whether or not there's separated bike infrastructure, the literature seems to indicate makes a huge difference in the amount of risk to cyclists. So that's kind of, I don't know if that literature is useful or who we show it to. The last update,
I think that's really good to know. I would say, we know for sure there's space in theory, again, for both a streetcar and a bike lane on Harney. That may not be the case on Farnham. It could be that we keep the bidirectional bike lane on Harney, and then the streetcar is on Farnham without a bike lane. I don't know. Again, I've been privy to zero conversations about all of this, but I think we're going to have to just stay engaged in the process and be willing to be a resource, and so that's what we plan to do, is whatever we can do to help point out what the lessons were learned in Seattle with the tracks and the crossing them with your bike and all of that stuff. There's been a lot of cities that have gone before us that have learned these lessons, sometimes the hard way, and we get the benefit of having our learning curve a lot shorter.
and then the last update, we're looking at placing the Namina sensors that I don't know if screen share is turned on. Benny, you know what those look like.
Correct. The tubes that go on the poles.
Yeah, so we're looking at putting those up, hopefully up as soon as possible on 72nd Dodge. I think the new, the statements from HDR that this is going to be a pedestrian friendly green space. I don't know how they're going to do that, but we'll get pedestrian interactions, but also it'll be able to count bikes. So we'll know. I saw you had a station imagined for that intersection, and it's hard for me to imagine where you would bike from there. But
yeah, it's like the chicken and egg argument. We're gonna put it there. I got concrete already poured. I actually have electricity for the station that I can't order anymore, so I don't even need the electricity because I got to use a different kind of station. But it's right on the northwest corner, right on the orbit stop. There's a big long stretch. You can see where a bike share station will go. And then next closest station will be the new one at 78th and Dodge by it was a Buc-ee's, and I'm not sure what it is now. Casey's maybe.
Anderson, whatever it is.
And that'll be, what's that?
Ideally, we'll be getting data for 2 months starting in February, and then it'll move over to the cycle track. So that's probably before you're going to have anything in, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But it'll, anything that you can think of, we're imagining the southwest corner, we decided to focus on.
Okay.
The southeast corner, though we're still working out some kinks. We thought everything was gravy with the city to plug into the traffic lights power source, but we're having a meeting on Thursday. I'm not sure where that actually stands. I know you haven't been on the email loops sometimes.
I would just, as a matter of fact, call that the Fuddruckers corner, just because I think that sounds best. And no one will mistake what you mean. The Fuddruckers corner, we all know which corner that is.
That's true.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Any last thoughts?
Yep.
I know, Charles, you came off mute once I don't know if you had something to say.
No, I think you pretty well covered it. I was just going to echo that a little bit of using like orbit in the streetcar to really leverage smarter design in the area of kind of, really, I mean, nothing but the banal, to be honest.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, so thank you both, Benny and Julie, for giving us updates. Thank you, Ryan, for really plugging away with that data. Like I got into that streetlights data a little bit and I found some places where like in my neighborhood, cars had been traveling like 75 miles an hour plus. I was able to say like on Northwest Radial, here's a stretch of road where pedestrians recently have died. And we have examples of people going 75 miles an hour on a 35 mile an hour road. So there's a